Thank you very much. Thanks all for the patience. Honorable Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs Dinesh Gunawardena, Honorable Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports Namal Rajapaksa, Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Admiral Professor Colombage, distinguished panelists and guest colleagues, dear United Nations staff, dear friends of the UN joining us online. This afternoon, I welcome you to the 75th anniversary celebration of the United Nations from Sri Lanka. In these complex times, this is an unconventional UN Day as we connect with all of you online. As we weather the storm of this global pandemic as one human family, I want to echo the words of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He notes that today, the founding mission of the UN is more critical than ever: to promote human dignity, protect human rights, respect international law, and save humanity from war. As the SG says, in 2020, we face colossal challenges. However, with global solidarity and cooperation, we can and we must overcome them. That's what the United Nations is all about. On this anniversary, the Secretary General asks people everywhere to join together. The United Nations not only stands with you, the United Nations belongs to you and is you. 75 years ago, the Charter began with the words, "We, the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and the equal rights of nations." As we celebrate today, let us honor this promise, each and every one of us, as a united human family in the 21st century. Together, let us uphold the enduring values of the United Nations Charter while we build on our advances across the decades. And Sri Lanka has certainly made considerable advances over the past decades. Among the numerous accomplishments that this island can rightly be proud of are a significantly reduced poverty rate, an excellent public health care system with nearly every child immunized, and successful elimination of malaria and mother-to-child transmission of HIV/AIDS, an accessible school system with high rates of female literacy, a capable civil society service, a resilient domestic service sector, and an internationally acclaimed manufacturing sector driving economic growth, and most recently, a whole-of-government effort to combat the coronavirus. The United Nations is proud of its partnership with the people of Sri Lanka on this remarkable journey. As we celebrate 75 years of our partnership, let us continue to shape our future together. Today, we need to discuss how to rebuild our lives and livelihood from the impact of COVID-19. So I invite you all to be bold in imagining the future we want and can create here in Sri Lanka and across the world. In this spirit, the UN is engaged in a global listening exercise, asking people about the future that they want. The UN 75 Youth Plenary convened in September suggests that young people want less inequality, better access to basic services, more support to the hardest hit areas, and more investment in youth and education. The biggest concerns are the destruction of the environment, inadequate responses to climate change, and healthcare. And their solutions are based on inclusion, better protection for the most vulnerable, and a fairer global economy. As we celebrate UN 75 today, I look forward to hearing from you, our distinguished guests, our vibrant young panelists, and followers on social media. I invite you wholeheartedly to share your wisdom, your passion, your inspiration, but also to voice your caution, criticism, and concerns. After all, the main demand of young people is to play a more meaningful role to decision making in the UN and beyond. And by listening genuinely, we can truly begin to shape our future together. In this spirit, let us commit today to the values of the UN and choose facts over fear, solidarity over division, understanding over discrimination, and to uphold the rights of everyone, everywhere, as we go into the second decade of global partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again sincerely for having joined us today, and it's now my great pleasure to invite our chief guest, the Honorable Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, to share his own words of welcome. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Excellency and the United Nations, for inviting me to celebrations for its 75th anniversary of the UN. It is indeed a historic occasion, especially given the long-standing partnership Sri Lanka has had with the UN for 65 years. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has prevented us from joining you at your office for these celebrations. However, I'm glad technology has brought us together virtually. I want to start by thanking the United Nations for its support to Sri Lanka in fighting the coronavirus outbreak. As the world takes on the challenges of this unprecedented global health crisis, it is more important than ever to work collectively on our shared challenges to overcome this pandemic. 75 years ago, on a day like tomorrow, the United Nations has created to be a global organization to act as the center of discussions on international cooperation, economic and social development, and international peace and security. It was the optimism of the UN Charter that instilled our faith in the UN's ability to create a better world for us and our children. The global platform has helped bring world leaders together during some of the most challenging times, such as today. As member states, I believe we need to support the United Nations as it evolves into a more agile and accountable institution. The world is changing dramatically, and an upgraded United Nations must both adapt and stay relevant. Having overcome a 3 decades-long war, Sri Lanka is on a transformative journey to becoming a more sustainable and resilient country. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, we are all desperately searching for solutions to build back our economies, societies, and global network. We are firm in our commitment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and create a greener and more sustainable environment for the future. I call upon my fellow world leaders to work collectively in restoring compassion back to this ecosystem in our respective countries. I appreciate the United Nations support for a wide range of sectors such as health, education, environment, agriculture, and food security. One of my most important memories working with the UN is when I had the opportunity to work with the children, especially after Easter Sunday attacks and during the pandemic. In addition to remaining committed to children's right and safety, I remain equally committed to addressing the challenges faced by women and girls, the elderly and the differently abled, and look forward to working closely with the UN Residence Coordinator and the country team. I extend my best wishes to the entire UN team here in Sri Lanka as you mark United Nations Day tomorrow. And I expect to continue the close cooperation in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. It's been really an honor that you give us this time. And thanks for all your appreciation to the role of the UN as well in the country. And I now move to the next part of our program, to our panel discussion. So I would like to welcome, and this is the UN 75th dialogue.
අපේ අනාගතය
அது எப்படி இருக்கு?
மிக முக்கியமா
කොහොම විය හැකිද?
வறுமையே இல்லாமல் இருந்தால்
What if respect and love always conquer violence?
අපේ මුඩු ප්ලාස්ටික් වලින් තොර වෙනවා.
காலநிலை மாற்றத்தை உங்களால் தடுக்க முடிந்தால்
සමානතා අයිති ඉතිහාසයට පමණක් නම් හැම දිනාටම අධ්‍යාපනය ලැබෙනවා නම්
எல்லா இளைஞர்களும் வலுவூட்டப்பட்டால்
එහෙම වුණොත්
அப்படி நடந்தா
what if
නිකම්ට හිතන්න
என்ன வெல்லாம் சாத்தியம் என்று
ඒ ගැන අපට කියන්න.
அவற்றை இந்த உலகத்துக்கே சொல்லுங்க.
එක්ව අපේ අනාගතය ගොඩනගන්න.
கலந்துரையாடலில் இணைந்து கொள்ளுங்கள். සංවාදයට එකතු වෙන්න.
All right, I would like to welcome you once again to this very special UN Day and the UN 75 dialogue at the UN studio. You have been following all the discussions and the dialogue. I don't need really to reaffirm again what the issues that we were discussing. But really the question is, how will we emerge? How will we emerge out of this crisis? Will we emerge stronger and better equipped to work together after this crisis? How should we change? And how should multilateralism change to be fit for purpose for the next 25 years and beyond? Therefore, 2020 must be a year of dialogue, right? When we come together to discuss our priorities as a human family and how we can build a better future for all. So this was the thinking of the UN 75 and the dialogues which are being held all over the world. And this was launched by the UN Secretary General with the aim of being the largest and furthest reaching worldwide conversation over ever actually on building the future we want. So by listening and learning, responding and engaging with as many people and constituencies as possible, this global event will also be an opportunity to trigger a dialogue about the UN itself. So this panel here today, comprising of young people from across Sri Lanka, will focus on the global theme of shaping our future together, highlighting the importance of global cooperation and innovative solutions as the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Young people are especially vital to drive recovery efforts towards a sustainable future, and their energy, enthusiasm, and innovation needs to be harnessed to build a better world. Therefore, this afternoon, I would like to introduce our distinguished panel. Joining with us, the Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports, Honorable Namal Rajapaksa. Next, we have with us Dr. Budima Subasinghe, a computer science academic and advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals. And also in our panel today is Shadika Wazir, Assistant Director in the Ministry of Education. And finally, we have activist and digital storyteller Binisos Tushan. So Let's start with the Minister of Youth, Mr. Namal Rajapaksa. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Hannah, and our Foreign Secretary, my dear panelists. I think, first of all, let me congratulate UN for its 75th anniversary, and also extend warm wishes to you and your staff in Sri Lanka. So talking about the current context, I think it's important to understand the ground reality and the challenges we face as a country, as a region, as a world. So looking at multilateralism, youth, and new normal for youth, I think we should understand these three pillars as three segments. So looking at multilateralism, at one point we were talking about globalization, but today I think the globalization is inevitable. It's something that has already happened through technology, and later on with bilateral relationship, multilateral relationship, and today we talk about multilateralism, where we be active parts of, actively involved in different organizations around the world. And then looking at youth, I'm sure my fellow panelists will be able to explain it more. So the youth today is much more different from the previous generation, I would say. And the challenges we face are much more different. And the needs, demands, and the reality is much more different from generations that has come across. So I would say we have evolved around technology and modern demands. So then we look at new normals. So what is a new normal? So for a youth, a new normal is not technology. It is part of our culture. If you look at Sri Lanka, we only have 22 million population, but we have 27 million mobile phone connections in this country. So technology itself is not a new normal for Sri Lankan or the global youth, I would say. But for the older generation, the new normal is a challenge. Because as you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic, things have changed. Today we are talking about having technological meetings rather than having face-to-face meetings, and getting used to working from home. You know, the traditional working hours is not going to work anymore, so we are looking at working at home 24/7. Whenever your office needs you, you're available. And that is not something new for the younger generation. If you look at people who are involved in tech industry or IT or any other profession, you know, even in the legal field, I would say. So we are used to working for the global timing, but not the older generation. So this new normal of technology, it is something to be adapted to the entire world and maybe for generations across. So at the same time, you're looking at the COVID-19 challenges. So our lifestyle has changed. So we are looking at getting back to the older habits. If you recall, when our grandparents used to tell us, you know, you have to wash your hands when you come home, it was a must. But today, for the younger generation, it's a new norm. Because our generation or the younger generation is not used to that. And you say "Aiboan" instead of shaking your hands. You know, it's a new norm for the younger generation, but for older generation, even looking at from our own Ayurvedic, or if you look at things like kotamalli, or you know, the Ayurvedic herbal drinks we talk about. You know, for the new generation, a fizzy drink or a coffee is something added valued coffee, not a black coffee, but maybe a cappuccino or latte is something they're used to it. But for older generation, that is not a new norm. So the challenge I would say that we have to face is how do we going to bring these two generations together and get them to understand to work together. Because these new normals are nothing new for us. It is in our cultures, it is in part of our life, but some we have forgotten and some we just have to get used to it. So the challenge would be for all of us to live with this and to adapt to the current demands and challenges that we have to face. And I think as an organization, in UN and even as a country, the biggest challenge we are going to face in the next couple of years is going to be how are we going to get our world back to be active. Because we are not active anymore. Because we are used to stay at home now, work from home. Keep your social distance. But I don't know why you call it social distance, because socializing is different, keeping distance is something else. But we always keep that popular term called social distance. So then how are we going to create employment? Because job cuts are taking all over the world. And already Sri Lanka has 21% youth unemployment rate. And when East attack hit this country last April, the tourism sector had got a big hit from that. And then gradually the economic downfall started. But then the pandemic came in late December or early December. So how are we going to face this? And how are we going to achieve our sustainable development goals? So these are the challenges I think we need to talk, and we need to listen to panelists like them, get the ideas, because they know what the ground reality, they know what the youth need. And I think organizations like UN can play a major role bringing these communities together, listening to them, understand them, and build a platform so their voice is heard, but not only heard, but their voice being implemented in different parts of the world. So I think one is to get used to the current mechanism, the current system, and live with it. Second, be active, be progressive, and how are we going to face the challenges of being unemployed, or how are we going to change employment, create employment. So Industrial Revolution 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about technology, AI, artificial intelligence, so which keep us more back, because you don't have to think anymore, your computer thinks for you. So with the pandemic, you allow your computer to think, you sit and just waiting there, then what is your next step? So these are the challenges I think we need to discuss, we need to understand, and we have to come up with innovative ways to address.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Indeed, I mean, this is very critical, and it's true, employment generation will be our most challenging next phase. So how do we deal with that, and what are the new ideas that we can come out with? And now I turn maybe to Dr. Budima Subasinghe, academic and advocate for sustainable development goals. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, Honorable Minister and the panelists. I think as the Honorable Minister mentioned, sustainable development is certainly the pathway for the future for all in the whole wide world. And sustainable development goals certainly does support us to move forward, to develop as nations. And when speaking of the sustainable development goals, one important aspect I'd like to highlight is education for all. Equal access to quality education is one important aspect we need to really think as a country, as a nation, as the world, when we speak of moving forward. And education, we say, is the most important weapon that can be used to change the world. Isn't that so? So what is this education? Education is, I believe, a facilitation of learning. It's the acquisition of language, skills, knowledge, and values and habits that we put all these things together to create a visionary, a leader, right? A leader that can take the world forward. So after all, when we speak of education, I think one aspect that we've really forgotten at some points is we think that education is only the book theories that we learn, but not the practical exposure that we really need to apply in our day-to-day lives. So I think when we speak of education for all, three things that I'd like to highlight is, one, we need to be skill-driven. Two, we need to be technology-driven. Three, we need to be insight-driven. Of course, when we speak of skill-driven, we do learn all the skills from the day that we have been born. Of course, we are all leaders because since the day we were born, we've been leading our lives. But the point is, with the book knowledge that we've been cramming and learning ever since we were in Montessori, kindergarten, grade 1 to grade 10 or 13, and then we sit our advanced level, then ordinary level, then we move to university, and we still cram, and we sit for our exams. But the question is, do we have the exact skills that we need to apply when we get into industry? So there's a clear gap that we see of the graduates that graduate and move into the industry when they are supposed to really work in their work platform. So that's one gap that really needs to be bridged in terms of developing skilled professionals to the industry. So I think when speaking of education, education for all, we need to highlight the fact that we have to also sometimes look into changing the ways that we deliver lessons, education to our children, because it's not just knowledge. but it's skills, values, habits, and all that combines together that becomes a true professional that needs to get into the industry. So that's one aspect that I'd like to highlight. And also when we speak of the technology side of it, I think the Honorable Minister already highlighted as well. The world is fast moving. We're talking about a smart world, a smart nation, a smart city. So when we speak of this fast moving world that moves ahead us, we need to also realize, like he rightly mentioned, whether we are going to be obsolete or we are going to get into this train called technology, or whether the train is really going to run over us. Because at one point, we wouldn't know the knowledge that we've gained from the books we've been using, but at one point we can become obsolete if we don't update ourselves with the technology that's upgrading and fast moving. The world is moving very fast at the moment, and when we speak of Sri Lanka as a whole, I think we need to also look into the aspect that we have to inculcate technology from the grassroots level, because when we speak of education, I think technology needs to be incorporated from the grassroots level for our students to be brought forward and shown them the path to take the lead in the industry. Because after all, if we speak of an accountant who is best in the accounting field, the accountant wouldn't have the job, like the Honorable Minister rightly mentioned, if the accountant is not able to work from home and is a master in Excel. So this is the future we are going to face. So I think insight driven is also another important aspect. Why? Because we've seen this cramming process from the school education to the university education and even beyond has really created a situation where our children don't really have the creativity and innovative ability in them. Back in the days, we speak of Sri Lanka having this proud history. We had the times where the kings used to be controlling our country. We had a lot of developments, inventions and innovations. But do we see those right now? With the current education system is a question that needs to be really addressed, is what I believe. So gaining insights from what we learn is key, is crucial, and is a part and parcel of creating a citizen who is a true professional, who is going to take leadership in the industry. And also when we speak of education, 250,000 students really sit for advanced level examination in Sri Lanka, but only 25,000 get the opportunity to get into a national university. The rest of the students would get the opportunity to either get into vocational training or maybe to another private or a semi-government university. So this gap in terms of equal access to quality education for all, I think needs to also be highlighted and at the same time looked into in the future. And also when we speak of the best schools, yes, we speak of the best technology being used in most of the schools in Colombo and also in certain other areas, but there are a bunch of kids out there in the different other parts of the country, and I'm sure certain other panelists also would vouch and add to it. They do not have textbooks or do not have a uniform to even go into a school, and sometimes they do not have a teacher to teach a particular subject that they love to learn and are passionate to learn. So I think when we speak of these aspects, equal access to quality education needs to be highlighted from the school level. But to do that, as the Honorable Minister mentioned, technology is available. So if we have the best teachers in the different other parts of the country, why don't we use technology to bridge this gap so that we can get the best teachers to also teach the other students in the different other parts of the country. So I think technology should be able to bridge this gap if we can create the digital infrastructure and support the country in terms of education. So, and on the other hand, if I speak of women's empowerment and leadership as a woman, sometimes we think that men do not give us the opportunity to take up leadership or maybe move forward in life. But I think as women, we also need to understand that we need to have a growth mindset and grab opportunities that are in front of us and make most out of them. If a lot of women can do that, and if women can also believe that I am a phenomenal woman and a phenomenal woman I am, definitely I think that self-belief itself would help them drive themselves forward. And yes, I'd like to hand over controls back to you, speaking a little bit about climate change as well. So climate change is another important thing, I think, that is affecting Sri Lanka at the moment, and as was mentioned in your speech as well. We need to also look into ways of combating climate change, and when we speak of this, we are all in a pandemic as the whole wide world, and at the same time we see that 7 million people are dying every year because of air pollution. And we might move forward to the world where we have to carry a can of oxygen or maybe an inhaler in the future. So Sri Lanka is facing a similar situation in terms of the communicable and the non-communicable diseases. So I think advocacy is important. Youth dialogue is important, and at the same time youth involvement is key and is important, and we also need to drive youth into technology and technological advancement, and we have to invest in research and development as a country for us to move forward. Over to you.
Thank you, phenomenal woman. Thank you very much. I think brilliant points about education is no more to read and write, but it's really, it has to be skill-driven, technology-driven, insight-driven. Your insights into the equity in education, and of course on the women empowerment and the importance to underline women empowerment by the supportive environment, but also from within, and absolutely your note on the climate change, which is our biggest challenge, one of our biggest challenges in Sri Lanka actually. Thank you very much. I turn around to another, I'm sure, phenomenal woman, and to panelist Shadika Wazir, Assistant Director in the Ministry of Education. So let's hear from you also. Thank you.
First of all, I would also like to extend my warm wishes to the United Nations and Honorable Minister, for the panelists. I don't think we can deny that the situation is quite dire. If you look at the facts, youth, the impact on youth from this global pandemic has been immense. It has impacted the employability or the employment of youth, with 1 in 6 young people losing their jobs, and around 42% of youth seeing a reduction in their salary or their income. And in education, where school systems have been shut down, and if you take Sri Lanka, now there's a mid-year intake for vocational training. We couldn't do that this year. So there is hindrance there. And then when you take the impact that it has had on the mental conditions or the psychological conditions of students and of youth, that is a whole new thing that we have to talk about. The global surveys also indicate that there have been impacts to global rights, the rights of youth. So all of this is driven by the basic inequalities we can see in the world, whether it is economic inequalities or when you talk about gender, we can see a huge inequality among men and women. In 2018, we saw a staggering fact that the 26 wealthiest people in the world had more wealth than the bottom half of the world. During the pandemic, though many people have lost their jobs and lost their incomes, we have seen the wealth of the billionaires rise by 27%. And when you talk about gender, as our Honorable Minister also mentioned, the rate of youth not in employment, education, and in training in Sri Lanka was around 21% or 26% 2 years back. In this percentage, around 66% is women. So there's a clear gender divide. So these inequalities actually drive the impacts further into our communities. And moving ahead, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the vision for 2030, of course, the achievements that we had planned for have been impacted by this virus. this pandemic. And we may not reach some of the goals or some of the targets as soon as in the speed that we wanted to. But what we should also realize is, though we may not go as far as we want, let's say we aim for 50% and we only go for like 49%, in that margin, that 1% lies the lives of millions of people, so we should not lose sight of that. And rebuilding after the pandemic can also be an opportunity to actually work towards reaching the Sustainable Development Goals, because now our vision has cleared up a bit because of this pandemic. This situation, the ground level situations, the grassroots have been, it's kind of visible to us more than before because of the pandemic. So there is an opportunity for us to take this as a lesson to build forward. And Sustainable Development Goals should not also be the end goal, it's a process. Right now, everything that we do towards it actually makes a contribution. So in terms of what young people can do, I would like to focus on 3 things, and especially I believe that young people can do a big job, play a big role here, because for one thing, young people are, we are not yet, we aren't as cynical maybe, because I saw this term somewhere, the authorization of an alternative reality. I think young people can see an alternative reality more than maybe a mature person, because we have not experienced despair maybe. So that is one thing. And the other thing is, the young people are those who are mostly impacted by this. So it is our role to actually do something about it. So I see 3 things that we can do. First, at an individual level, I think we have seen a rise in volunteers in this country, from distributing packets of food to innovative approaches where young people just talk to elders and talk to others and just help them out in the psychologically. And we've seen some instances where, now for example, apart from what I normally do, I also volunteer at a school as a teacher. And we've tried to have a dialogue with students as to how important the dialogue and the relationship among faiths, among communities are during a situation like this, during a pandemic. So this has given opportunities for individuals to get into something that we can contribute individually and as a country, as our Honorable Minister mentioned, our uniqueness as a country and what that can contribute to the global community. The other thing is, I think young people should push for systematic change, because we can do a lot of things as a person, but there is no substitute for a just, equitable, compassionate, universal social program. So young people can play a role in pushing systems to change, to create this universal social program. Because what we see, as Dr. Buddhima also mentioned about the school system, we see the World Economic Forum has put out the 10 most important skills for employability, and in that we see the addition of cognitive flexibility and of emotional intelligence these days. So that may be an aspect that education has to look into in creating systematic change, and the weight placed on transferable skills, because in a fast changing world, you have to have transferable skills to move from one thing to another. So these are things that we have to look into when envisioning a systematic change. And the third thing is, I think young people can do more and take this opportunity towards spiritual development. Because all our policies, all our designs come from a foundation of our beliefs, a foundation of spirituality, I would say. And as Sri Lanka, I think sustainability has been woven into Sri Lanka from across our history. So it is not a new concept to us as Sri Lankans. And all our faiths have taught us to be compassionate, taught us again to be sustainable, to live sustainably. And because of this, this is an opportunity for spiritual development, because even as a country, all our policies, all the new decisions that we make can come from that. And to just touch into something really practical, we've seen connectivity and resource sharing, and a lot of education, learning going on because of this connectivity. But there is also, we should not forget that there is a section of our communities that has no connectivity. So maybe we have also got to look into how those communities can sustain and can be towards self-sufficiency without connectivity. If they are isolated in a small village or in a location, how do you sustain yourself, and how do you help the community without connectivity? And lastly, to bridge that gap. So I think these are the things that we can focus on, and I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity and hand over the controls to you.
Excellent inputs again. Thank you very much. I note, of course, your underlying of the spiritual development. I think this is a new point. I note the young people, your call for young people to push for systematic change, and you also touched on the equity and the equality. About bridging the gap between those who have and those who don't. And I like very much your word, authorization of alternative reality. This is a new phrase now that I'll pick up, and the ability of the youth to do that, because they are the mostly impacted as well.
The original person who, I don't know where it came from, it was just used in a
I like it. I think I'm sure it's a new, new trendy phrase now. Thank you, Shadika. Really very, very interesting inputs as well. So now completing our panel is Binuslas Tushan, activist and digital storyteller. I didn't know about that, but I will. Great. Over to you, Tor.
Honorable Minister, esteemed panelists, fellow Sri Lankans. Vanakkam, Aibawan, good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. I'm here as a young person who wants to share something out of my experience, and also to talk about three converging ideas of multilateralism, young people, and multilateralism, young people, and digital technologies. And I want to talk about two important areas. Firstly, building bridges. So having been working with young people from different parts of Sri Lanka and giving them the skill of digital storytelling, how do you take ownership of your narratives? How do you tell your stories? One of the finest things I have understood is that when you bring these skills of being able to tell your own story, being able to take ownership of your own narrative, being able to communicate about what your community stands for directly to the world, it really empowers young people to bring out their identities onto the mainstream. I have been listening and hearing about how do we give a platform for young people to create their voices, to bring out their voices, and to be heard. Because this is one of the common complaints, that young people are not given enough platforms to be heard, and they are not given enough opportunities to raise their voices. But one of the finest things the technology has enabled us to do, by simply giving us a smartphone with a decent camera, with internet connectivity, with social media connectivity, and an audience at the outset itself, it has really enabled the young people to bring out their authentic voices from their community. I would like to share an experience. I was talking to someone from Australia who came back during a vacation, and I met him in Jaffna. And he shared something very interesting. So he has come back to Jaffna after almost 20 years since he has migrated in Australia. And he said, like, I didn't know Jaffna would look like this. And it is completely different from the idea I had about Jaffna. Right? And he shared something very interesting. Is for those who are living abroad, like say they've left Sri Lanka in 1980s, the graph about Jaffna would be like this 1980, and it would be a flat line. And their perception about the country is when they left the country. But the country keeps moving forward, and the disparity of understanding keeps growing. Right? So when we work with young people, we gave them this ability to tell their own stories to the communities. Nothing much, no rocket science. Take simple pictures, write simple captions, take simple videos, post it online. And we encourage them to create some of the stories, storytelling movements also. So one of this movement that was very close to my heart is a movement called Everyday Mullativ, which focuses on telling everyday stories from Mullativ. And this student, his name is Vidrashan, he came and told me, sir, most often people remember my district as a district that is affected by war. But we are also people who are hopeful. We are also people who wants to share this prosperity, share our dreams. So I'm not going to let the label define us. Yes, we are post-war district, but I'm going to let the world know that there is a lot of happiness here. A lot of people are working hard. And he started sharing a couple of these stories about how people are being happy, how they are socializing together. And there was this immediate backlash that came from the diaspora community saying that you're sanitizing their struggle. But all what he wanted to do was to showcase how his district looked like. I'm not trying to demonize any communities here, but I would like to really bring the point about young people, digital technologies, and multilateralism. And the multilateralism at its essence is, if you look at Sri Lanka, right? I've done a study about Tamil market, Tamil Facebook market. And there are interesting stakeholders if you really look at it. There are Tamil-speaking Tamils who are on the Tamil Facebook market. There is Tamil-speaking Muslim community. There's South India community, which has a huge interest on Tamil market, and also the diaspora market. And there's a lot of cross-pollination of contents that's happening between them. But if we can give young people this voice, this ability, these skills to take ownership of their narratives, and to tell the stories of their communities, rather than not having to depend on mainstream media, rather than not having to depend on anyone else to come and tell their story, but to take the ownership by themselves. And taking it by themselves and bringing it to the world, it gives them power. It empowers them. That's why I sincerely believe storytelling is empowering. And as Honorable Minister touched, and some of the other panelists spoke in their speeches, secondly, I would like to focus about creating equitable access to technology. One of the latest surveys suggests that 60% of the world population is now connected online, right? And if you even take 60%, we could be hopeful that 60% is connected online, but 40% are left behind. And even if we take Sri Lanka, right, on the second layer, not all those connected online have enough skills and have enough digital literacy to be able to understand and navigate the nuances of social media and also the digital realm. And also, although digital realm is lot hopeful and optimistic, but it's a double-edged sword also. And we have been witnessing the effects of it by the weaponization of social media in the past decade that was happening time and time again. So how do we reach those who already have access to these digital tools? And how do we give them enough skills, right? And not only giving them enough skills, thirdly, digital technology mostly favors those who know English. And the native language support in Sinhala and in Tamil is very limited. One of the interesting interesting story I want to share with you is I was teaching 20 kids from the plantation sector in an estate called Panvel Estate 2 years before. And I gave them a homework. I taught them about the storytelling skills, and I gave them a homework of collect 2 or 3 interviews from your community and post them online. And one of those students stood up in the class and said, sir, I couldn't find the coverage, necessary coverage. I had to walk 1 kilometer from my home to a street corner where there was enough coverage to post it. And there was that amount of commitment when you take these necessary skills to them. But one thing I want to highlight to the young people out there is, sometimes when we are blessed with these digital tools, digital technologies, digital literacy, and also connectivity, sometimes we like to constrain ourselves within a bubble, thinking that everything is okay, right? 27, as Honorable Minister said, there's 27 million smartphones that are connected. There's more SIM cards that are registered more than the population of Sri Lanka. But there are also areas that needs more of this access, more of this equitable access. And speaking about the new normal that is happening, we are seeing most of the classrooms are moving online. Students are connecting online. As Dr. Buddhima said, we can share some of these brilliant teachers, we can get them connected online. But we also need to realize that there's a lot of students from the lower spectrum of the society who are left behind. And this could be the new modern poverty, the poverty of inaccessibility, and this poverty of inequitable access to resources. And how the multilateral organizations and the communities could come together is, as we look at the progress of the humanity, because of the multilateral cooperation and the global cooperation, we have been able to cure many diseases. We have been able to pick many people out of global hunger and poverty, right? But now we can also focus on creating these accessibility to the communities that are left behind, so that we can ensure none of the Sri Lankans are left behind. And everyone could have a piece of the pie in the digital future. And I'm pretty sure if young people come together, and as my fellow panelists emphasize, as we come together, as we not only be able to use and optimize these resources, as we are also able to understand where there are gaps and where we can amplify our voices in showing these gaps to the policymakers, we can create an equitable society, and we can create a younger generation that could lead this country forward, and that could really impact the humanity in many ways.
Thank you. Thank you for your brilliant storytelling of really showing how technology is the new platform for youth to be heard, and for policymakers also to hear them. And what is the most critical is giving the accessibility to all and leaving no one behind. So brilliant intervention. Thank you so much as well. Now, thank you all for your insightful comments. I know many of the audience members have already questions and would like to hear some answers. But before that, so please continue sending your questions. We are getting it online. But as I said earlier, we are commemorating the United Nations 75th anniversary, and it's vital that we learn and apply the lessons of the past in shaping our future. Therefore, we also have three esteemed guests with us that will give us a little insights from the many lessons they have learned. Allow me to start now and to give the floor to our Foreign Secretary, Admiral Colomba Gay. Professor, would you like to make some comments on what you have heard? Thanks.
Yes, I certainly like Honorable Minister Hannah and the young people. I think I'm the youngest in this gathering, so I'm happy to be with everyone. Yes, we are having a new world. I mean, in 2019, we were expecting a new world order to emerge, but the world that we are having is not what we expected. You know, of course, the minister said we are already in the globalization, but now we talk about globalization as well. And there were huge interruption to global supply chain, and there were increased use of technology, right? And there are a lot of things. Now, I think we are all waiting to use the word post-COVID world, but it is an elusive word so far, unfortunately, for the whole world. Not only Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has done extremely well in battling the COVID, but this post-COVID world, do we want the same world that we lived in 2019? I think the answer is no. You have to change what you want. It should not be the same world that we had in 2019. Now, COVID has really opened our eyes. It has opened to look at ourselves, to look at our values. Now, the minister mentioned about certain values we have inherited. Even others spoke about how we inherited values from our grandparents and our parents. But over a period of time, we conveniently forgot them. But now we are embracing these values, which are very essential for the sustenance of a society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have no right to take your future away from you. We, our generation, have done enough to destroy the environment on land, at sea. We have no more right, we have no more reason to take anything away from you. That we should be very conscious about. We have an excuse, we didn't know. While now we don't have that excuse, now we know. what we have done, we now know the implications. So we have no right, and I think that goes to everybody. And of course, future is yours. Your voices must be heard. But then we can't be waiting for opportunities and platforms to come our way. We need to grab every opportunity which is available in our community, in our society, in our country. Youth has to grab each and every opportunity. Don't wait until it comes to you. It may never come to you. But if you look around, there are plenty of opportunities floating around in your own country, in the world. And then many things were spoken about education. You see, I think you brought this fact. Education is great, but skills development is what we need. Are we as a country, are we producing the graduates which are suitable to the job market? It's a big question that we have. We have a lady from the Education Ministry, and that is why I think the President is determined to have a complete new education policy encompassing the practical aspects of it. President has been always talking about two things in education: technology and languages. Without these two, you might be a master's or a PhD, but if you are not conversant with technology and another language or two, we have a problem. When I say language, not necessarily foreign languages, but our own three languages, Sinhala, English and Tamil. We have to be very positively learning our language so that we can communicate better. And that is the challenge for the youth, not to depend on one language and a foreign language, but learn the languages around you. That's what I meant, grab every opportunity. Yes, of course, we need to embrace technology, and the Honorable Minister mentioned about Industrial Revolution 4.0, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data, 3D printing. But let me ask you a question. Have we completely achieved Industrial Revolution 3.0? Has the world really achieved the Industrial Revolution 3.0? When some countries are talking about 4.0, many of the countries have not even reached 3.0, and it is same in our country as well, right? So embrace technology, but don't be a slave. That is one thing I want to say. Yes, we need technology in our life to make things easier, but if we become a slave, we become a sick population, we become a sick nation, because we are depending too much on technology. I will not go one by one. I'm trying to generalize the thing. So I think everybody spoke about the need for education. I think I have summarized that. We need skills development. We need life skills. How many of us can screw a nail properly? We can't, right? We depend on the carpenter. We depend on the mason to do everything. No, we need to develop those skills. That is the big challenge for the youth. It makes life very easy for you if you are skilled enough to do everything. So gaining insight. You mentioned the fact 25,000 students can only go to the university. University education is great, but that's not the only way. There are so many other avenues for us to learn. Now Sri Lanka is having a huge problem with the labor, and we conveniently blame, okay, foreign countries have brought labor, but why aren't we getting ready to undertake the jobs? That's the thing. So then, phenomenal women empowerment. I think the women can really play a very contributory role to the development of a country. We need to get more involvement from the women, especially in Sri Lanka and the world over. They are a power, a mother's power. No one can match. What a mother can bear, no man can handle that. So there are unlimited endurance you have, unlimited bearing capacity you have, and you have to run. And I think mention about global warming. Global warming and climate change is real. Now, as an island nation, we are very vulnerable. And climate change is something that an individual country alone cannot handle. That is where the multilateral agencies come. That is where the United Nations come with the goals, the sustainable development goals. We have to work together to protect our own environment. And we have destroyed it enough. At least now, let us stop destroying our environment and prevent. And if the climate change happens, there will be mass migration, loss of livelihood, and we suffer immensely. We can't even think what will happen. Then of course, youth heavily impacted from COVID, yes, because the job opportunities are not there. Youth like to, the youth is normally work, earn and spend. But now you can work little, I mean not as we used to do. You may be earning, but you can't spend the money, right? So when that three cycles are, the three are broken, you're not happy. But then you have to live with the reality. We have to understand the COVID is real. It is here. It is with us. Then also one word about wealth distribution. I think as youth, we must never expect the wealth to be distributed to us. It will never happen, right? What we should do is we must acquire wealth. We must work hard to acquire wealth. If someone is rich, let him have it, right? There is no point trying to, even think that this world will never be that. Wealth distribution will never ever happen in this world. But what we should do is to become wealthy. Work hard, look for opportunities, grab every opportunity and grab wealth. That's my message to you. That can change the systematic change that you are expecting. And systematic change, very critical, but never through violence. That is my message to you. Never through violence, but through peace, through the means that you have. Yes, any system needs changes, but not through violence, right? And I also mentioned about living with the environment, spiritual intelligence, emotional intelligence. These are very great. Storytelling, my message is we should always tell stories. We should always dream about. We should always dream about achieving things. We all should be dreamers. If we don't dream, we are not going to achieve anything. If we are just another member of the pack, okay, the life is good, my parents have given me this, I'm okay, I'm happy with what I have a house, I have things. No, we need to dream. Only the dreamers succeed. So we have to dream, and that is where the storytelling comes. We have to dream, and we have to tell this dream to others. We have to share it with others. We have to share the stories, right? And another thing about dreaming is now the youth must never think of challenging others. Challenge yourself. That is the way. If you challenge others, you are trying to match someone. But if you challenge yourself, you will realize your potential, you will realize your capabilities, you will realize your capacity, which is unlimited. So please challenge yourself. So finally, digital connectivity mentioned, and we know what happened because there were webinars conducted, all the leading schools, children benefited, but there were so many children in our own country which could not access the Wi-Fi. So the webinar, of course, it was a huge success in many places, but we have connectivity issues. So my final message is harmony and peace as one country, one people. We might have differences in whatever the language we speak, the religion we believe, but we are all human. As one country, as one world. We, the people of the United Nations, the world, we are one world. Multilateralism is the way forward. Individually, there are limits we can go, but beyond that, we cannot go unless we believe in the multilateralism. And then that's the best way to face the global challenges that you keep talking about. Challenges are there. You can't stop them, but face the challenges as one world. And finally, measurables. We must always look at measurables, tangible measurables, not just thoughts, not just ideas, not just perception, but targeted, benchmark, measurables, tangible. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Admiral Professor Colombage. Thank you. I like the harmony and peace of one country, one people, the ability to dream and never lose the perspective of a dream. Thank you so much. And now we will connect with Chairman UN Global Compact Sri Lanka, Dilan Fernando, who will give us some insights from the private sector perspective. Welcome, Dilan.
Thank you, Hannah. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you. I mean, I'm so blessed to have heard some of these thoughts. And from a private sector perspective, I would say that COVID has shown us what lies beyond. And I think whilst today we have some incredible challenges, what also becomes clear is that there are more beyond. And the panelists expressed very clearly the issues of inequality and of climate that are looming. And it would be not only immoral, but it also would be counterproductive for us to marginalize any segment of society, whether on the basis of gender or race or ability or age. And having a quarter of our population in this youth or classified as youth, I think we have a fantastic asset. I mean, it's not only the youth, it's also women and so on. What COVID also showed us is the power of collaboration. And clearly we realize that whether it is developing a vaccine or addressing a climate or mitigating a climate threat, none of this can be achieved without collaboration. And I think the greatest power, or possibly the first step in that collaboration, must be within, where we harness the potential in our own people. Now, there was a really alarming point that Mr. Tushan mentioned about a poverty of access, which I believe that is something that the private sector must work with the government in addressing, because if we fail to provide access and create an enabling environment, not only with technology, but in terms of ideas and in terms of the concept that Dr. Subhasinghe mentioned about creation of a leader, we will not be able to help the youth in harnessing their dreams. And when you do that, you have a very potent combination of frustration, anger, and ultimately instability. So I would say that from a private sector perspective, we need to recalibrate, not simply to the new commercial environment, but to the fact that our role as businesses is fundamentally changed. In the past, it was fine to say, yes, it is the role of government, but today we need to look inward. We need to understand the responsibility that business has, and we need to understand the obligation that we have socially, environmentally, to our community to address gender issues, to embrace them. So I would say that it needs incredible humility to unlearn some of the conventions that we have always considered, and really to align with the SDGs as we look to the future. And in doing so, I think we can create an environment where we can combine with academia, with government, in addressing the objective of bringing youth to the table, giving them not just a voice, not just access, but also giving them the opportunity to demonstrate their ability. And that is a very powerful thing to us. And I can tell you from working with young people, whether they are interns or others, fresh thinking, and they themselves define innovation because they are not fettered by some of the conventions that we have over the years refined and burdened ourselves with. So young people to the private sector represents innovation. It represents an opportunity that must be taken for the greater good, not only of our businesses, but also of our nation. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you very much. And young people represent in themselves innovation. So a good introduction and a good motivation to the young people. Thank you very much. Now we have with us the president of Sarvodaya, Dr. Vinya, an active voice of civil society in the country. So over to you, Dr. Vinya.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be participating at this UN 75 dialogue on the theme Shaping Our Future Together and the Role of Multilateralism. The panelists have very well articulated the important aspects related to multilateralism and youth involvement. I have been asked to reflect on how civil society can empower the young people to harness the multilateral system for COVID-19 recovery and shaping the future. At the outset, I must say that the youth of Sri Lanka are an integral part of a vibrant civil society, and we have already seen different levels of interaction by the youth in responding to the COVID-19 crisis. So therefore, it's very difficult to separate youth from the civil society itself. Now, as we all know, and as we have heard over and over again, this pandemic is unprecedented in human history, and the scale and depth of its impact is also very unpredictable. It's still unfolding in our country, although we have had a very good control up to now of COVID-19, but it's still not fully under control anywhere in the world. Therefore, we simply do not have a choice but to shape our future together and find solutions together. So multilateralism is all about working together on a common goal. We are at a critical turning point in our history. The climate change, COVID-19, looming economic crisis, internal conflicts all demand collective action, and multilateral cooperation is a must. Now, during the first phase of the COVID-19 in the country, that is between late March and end May, we have seen young people being engaged in the COVID-19 response in activities ranging from providing emergency relief supplies to the affected individuals and families, to care institutions, also involved in health education and risk communication activities, and also, very importantly, finding innovative technological solutions to address certain issues connected with the COVID crisis. We have also seen the strong advocacy role played by the youth through social media on core social issues connected to COVID-19 in Sri Lanka, such as stigma and discrimination against COVID-19 affected individuals and families. So the role of organized civil society, as I see, is to guide the youth, empower them with additional scientific knowledge and required tools to respond to social and economic issues faced by communities in the so-called new normal. Now, youth and youth organizations should be made aware of the resources available with the multilateral agencies and be encouraged to utilize their expertise and resources where necessary, and to take the lead to adapt them to the country realities. We often see a mismatch between what is being implemented in a country setting without taking into account the cultural and social setting. So in the current COVID-19 context of Sri Lanka, youth can play a pivotal role in addressing important social issues such as protection of children, women and girls, and other vulnerable groups. Honorable Prime Minister referred to these groups in his presentation, address psychosocial issues, and also, importantly, in economic recovery. We know that the UN system has also been helping to promote social entrepreneurship amongst the youth. This is particularly important when one looks at the larger number of people, mainly youth, who will be who have already lost their jobs, who will also be losing their jobs as a result of closure of industries and businesses due to COVID-19. Actually, Dr. Buddhima highlighted the importance of promoting the use of technology, particularly at the community level. Grassroots approach is very important, and I'm very happy that Dr. Buddhima highlighted this. And also Benny Slows also shared the potential of the information communication technology and how powerful it can be to really give the message of the reality that is faced by a majority of the people in any country. So my final message is that this new normal is an opportunity to reimagine the way we function as a society. Multilateralism is centered around healthy relationships. Relationships should be built on human values and on mutual respect. Healthy relationships start with our own self, our inner being. Hence, we need to start with our own values, cultivating spiritual values, and I'm very happy that Shadika touched on this point. The civil society led by youth, therefore, has to help to create a space for healthy relationships within our society, particularly in a society like ours, where we have different communities, belonging to different ethnicities and religions, which will be the foundation on which we'll develop healthy relationships or cooperation for COVID-19 recovery, whether they are unilateral, bilateral, or multilateral, in a very constructive way. That way we can shape our future together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vinya. I mean, your role, of course, in civil society activism has been always of great help to multilateralism as well. So thank you for your time and your contribution. Friends, the overall goal, of course, of this conversation is to hear from young people, and we have still 3 fantastic speakers. But before, maybe I ask for their permission, given the time of the Honorable Minister, maybe I raise some of the questions that came online first, and then we go back to the rest of the speakers. So there is a question, Mr. Minister, from Rizvan Reza. Technology isn't accessible to everyone, especially young people in the rural areas. So what is the government doing to ensure accessible technology to all young people in Sri Lanka? So this is one question. Second question is from Ishani, and she says, first of all, I would like to wish the UN thank you very much for your best wishes. Now, she's asking, why is gender equality important? And then if it's important, so what are the programs to improve gender equality in youth livelihood development? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Han. I think talking of technology, this is something that our government has been concentrating for a long time. For example, in 2005, we started Nanasala and the IT technology program to take IT to the rural areas. So this is to increase the IT literacy rate. So I do agree that there are certain pockets, as our panelists explained. So this is something that we are working on as government. One is to digitalize schools. So already the government and the education ministry has partnership with the telco organizations to take technology to the villages and also introduce the Mahinda lab where we will provide technology to rural schools. So in that way, there will be more access to technology. So the one thing is about technology, other thing about transferring knowledge to the rural areas. So teacher training programs, training youth in rural areas to get used to technology or how to use it, and also doing curriculum based on technology, as our panelist explained, getting into skill development and vocational training. You see, it is something that is utmost important at this stage. But at the same time, the one thing that I personally believe that we are lacking is research. So we don't invest much time and money on research. So this is what, as a youth ministry, that we are concentrating purely or mainly on investing on research and investing our time on research. Because see, we need to match our education with the world job market. There is no point you provide technology, you teach someone to use a computer, but if that lesson doesn't may give him a job, or if that literacy rate doesn't convert into an economic literacy rate, then there is no point taking technology into the village. As I earlier mentioned, we have 27 million mobile phone connections, but how many people use it in a positive way? So this is something that we have to take to the rural masses. So talking of technology, taking it to the village is something that we are looking at, and we already started. And last or 2 cabinets before, we approved a cabinet paper through the education ministry to provide the computers or laptops to rural schools or to all the schools in this country. So the kids will get more used to it. And already we have started digitalizing the school network. So at the end of the year, we will have 4.6 million students registered on the digital platform. And from the youth ministry, we are looking at launching a new app. So this is a mixture of a job portal, an SME sector, and a sports app, because my ministry has to deal with the sports people and also with the youth as well. So, but the biggest challenge connecting these two is unemployment. So we need to find employment. We need to create employment. We need to connect SMEs with the rest of the world. So that's what we thought of coming up with the innovative app. So we will create a platform for everyone to find their needs. You can have your own profile, but you can also look for your employability. So even for an investor to come into this country, if you're looking for plumbers, if you're looking for carpenters, you need to know where you can get them. Like any of us, we go to Kataragama, we go to Jaffna on our way. If you want to find a garage, there is no way you can find it unless you ask from someone. So we need to use technology to connect these dots. So once you do that, then the the questions will be answered. So we will look at expanding technology to rural schools, giving them access to technology, computers, and also looking at training the teachers, giving them digital literacy, how to teach their kids with these innovative ideas. Then looking at the second point, the gender. I think she gave the best answer for that, because it's not that there is no opportunities. It's about how you present yourself, right? So we believe in equality. So we believe everyone should be heard and also given equal opportunity. It doesn't matter what's your sexual orientation or what's your gender equal, what gender you represent or what language you speak, what religion you believe in or what faith you have. As long as you believe in it and you are capable of delivering it, the opportunity is there. Sri Lanka has a good record in that. If you look at starting from Mrs. Sirimao Bandaranayake to Chandrika Bandaranayake, and only Olympic medal we have is from Susantika, right? So we do have good case studies, we have good stories to tell. But the question is, are we taking enough, are we grabbing these opportunities? Are we actually looking at taking these opportunities? So even if you look at the sporting arena, we have more opportunities winning medals in female events. Even track and field or even rugby. Rugby is known as a men's sport, but we do have inspector generals in police now who are females. And we have the females managing rugby clubs in Sri Lanka for the first time in the entire rugby history, in the world rugby history. And we have CEOs, like starting from Katsuri to the IGP, to the DIG, or all these areas we have enough examples. But it's all about how you take the opportunity, how you take it forward. But as a government, as a ministry, as a government, we are pretty much clear with our vision. We will not have any sort of discrimination based on gender or sexual orientation.
That's excellent to hear that, and indeed Sri Lanka has a good story to say, but we look forward also for even better stories. And better and equal, better supportive environment for more women to really get engaged, especially on the political front as well. We have excellent resources here. So and now we have the commitment from the government as well. So I think that's a very good point as well. So, Mr. Minister, thanks if you're continuing with us, but thank you so much for your time and your commitment and for the advice that you're giving also to the young people. We still have 3 more excellent speakers that we need to listen to, and since especially they are young, so we have to continue with that. So maybe our next intervention is from the co-founder of #Generation, Mahisha Balraj. Mahisha, over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. At this opportunity, I would like to wish the UN on its 75th anniversary. And also, thank you for having me on this great discussion. It's definitely an honor. Esteemed panelists and friends, there has been a lot of discussion on the power of technology, and a lot of eminent panelists have spoken about how the power of technology can greatly benefit the youth. Tushan had a specific focus on the very positive outlook of how digital technologies are harnessing the potential of young people and giving them a platform and a voice, enabling them to own their narratives through storytelling. That being said, I would also like to add on to that. While looking at the positive side, it's also important to take cognizance of the fact that with the increasing use of digital technologies, there's an increase in conflict in the digital space, especially we're seeing this increasing during the COVID-19 crisis. As the globalized digital technologies and platforms flourish, they help to promote increased polarization that can be based on a number of factors, including social, religious, political, and other interests or ideologies. And then this results in online conflict, which also then sometimes has the potential to translate into offline conflicts and violence. And in Sri Lanka, we've seen this happen many times, and especially in the recent past. Some examples are, we were all familiar with the sterilization pill and Dr. Shafi, and now, of course, the targeting of ethnic minorities during this COVID-19 pandemic. And with the advent of digital technologies, it has made access very easy, like we've had Honorable Minister point out, Tushan pointed out, access to mobile phones is not a problem in Sri Lanka. And this then enables a wide range of people to become actors in the dynamic of conflict. The triggers for such conflict can take many shapes and forms, and it includes disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech. There are also other forms of violence, such as gender-based violence, cyberbullying, child pornography, and so on. And during this crisis and pandemic, and going forward, we're only seeing this increasing, and there has to be measures that must be taken to curb and mitigate it. For example, if you look at disinformation and the ease at which you can spread it, all you need is access to some form of digital technology that enables anyone with sort of minimal skills and an equipment to sort of then become the source of this misinformation and disinformation. And this then is supplemented by the fact of anonymity, where you can just sit behind a screen and this works in the favor of the perpetrator. So then what is the solution to this? I'm only focusing on this aspect, and obviously, as it has been pointed out before, digital technologies has been providing a voice for the marginalized and for people who have otherwise been disenfranchised. And while also taking that into consideration, I'm only trying to address this issue of conflict in the digital space and now how we can then mitigate and find solutions to it. That's where the multilateralism comes into play. World over, we're facing this problem of cyber violence, and we're grappling with this problem and trying to find innovative solutions. And that's where the role of young people really comes into play as well. So it's the pillars of young people, multilateralism, and innovation that comes together, and we have to find long-term and short-term strategies to address this issue. Some short-term strategies, like Dr. Vinya had already pointed out, it could be counter-narratives, social media community campaigns, creating awareness, fact checks, and the long-term strategies could be I would like to add on to what Shadika had to say about value-based education, spiritual values to be integrated, because the violence and conflict that you see online is not just unique to the online space, but it is an extension of the violence and conflict that is offline that is then being extended to the online space. So it is important to integrate a value-based education into our formal curriculum, also integrating digital citizenship and digital literacy. Honorable Minister also pointed out that they're taking measures to take the technology to the village. It's great, it's a great initiative, but also to please keep in mind that while such technology is being taken to the villagers, it is very important to teach these young people the skills and the values on how to be safe online. Without these tools, then that leads to a vicious cycle of further problems. While being said that, there is also, the Honorable Minister also focused on research, and it is important to research on this area. We at #Generation are doing our small part by monitoring social media platforms and working closely with intermediaries such as Facebook. So it's important to invest in research to prevent non-recurrence, and early warnings. Research will indicate that, and these problems online will definitely surface online before translating into offline conflict. There must be rich exchanges of the lessons learned across the globe, and this is where I feel like the UN, the organization, multilateral organizations like the UN can step into play, where they can bring a multi-stakeholder approach and collaborations with different parts of the world to address this issue, and we will emerge stronger in the post-COVID-19 world. And we must all strive to keep fighting the good fight to ensure that we leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahishi. Very good points about the violence of the cyber violence and the implication of that. I like your comments about the importance of a value-based education, and that even as we mainstream technology, it's important that we have the skills and the values have to be safe online. Thank you so much for your intervention. I now go to the founder of the You Decide mediation platform, Sarani Gunatna Laka.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you very much. First of all, I wish UN a happy 75th anniversary, which falls tomorrow. But now, since Hannah actually invited all of us to raise our concerns whilst agreeing with some of the very positive points that were brought forward by the panelists, let me with respect disagree on one point that was brought by the panelists, especially with regard to gender equality in Sri Lanka. I must say this with due respect that I do not agree that the only issue that we have in Sri Lanka with regard to gender equality is about females not thinking of themselves as being phenomenal women. I'm sorry to say that, because we have a vast, a huge range of issues which are holding our women back from moving forward. I must say this because if we are privileged women, of course, your self-belief would help you go forward. But we should not forget that there are hundreds and thousands of females in this country, as well as in the world, who think and who know that they are phenomenal. And I think for that, in that sense, that every woman is a phenomenal woman. However, the problem is that whether we have created that necessary platform for all of these women to come forward. I don't think we can make a statement that we do have all necessary opportunities for women and that it's their fault for not grabbing those opportunities, because according to World Economic Forum, Sri Lanka's gender gap compared to 153 countries, we are now at the 112th place, as opposed to every other country. Even if we compare the same with the South Asian standards, Bangladesh is in the 50th place, as opposed to us. So we have to first, with all due respect, I invite all of you to think and first concede and admit that we have a lot more to do if we are to get away and if we are to address this issue of gender gap that we are experiencing on a daily basis, starting with the pay gaps, starting with the less opportunities for women, especially when it comes to people who go on maternity leave, and when you come back, you don't sometimes have your table and your chair where you were already working, and your work opportunities to go high up. All these things reduce at a rate, and females fear of getting pregnant. And being a career woman, those two have become alternative choices for women in this country and in the world. So I suggest that let us please be aware of the reality, and let us please accept and admit that there is a gap that exists, and let us please stand together as youth in addressing these issues. That is my humble request at the first place. Now, moving on from that, the second issue, which is also related to that, we are talking about this in a country today where we do not have a cabinet portfolio for women. And we are talking about this in a country today where the only state ministry under which the Women's Committee, the Women's Bureau falls, and even the subject of domestic violence falls, does not identify women's raising with the voice of women and developing their skills as a special priority. If you look at the Gazette notification on the subjects of ministries, out of 14 subjects, only three subjects have focused on women, and the rest is all based on child and child education. And unless we are able to differentiate the role of women from her role as a mother, we have to remember that the role of being a mother is only a part of the wide role that is played by women at large. So unless we recognize that, how are we going to raise the voice of women and establish gender equality in Sri Lanka? I'm sorry, I'm emotional for all the women in the country, because this is an existing problem. And this was identified on a multilateral level when Helen Clark, the former New Zealand Prime Minister, together with world leaders, established the World Leaders for Change and Inclusion, where they identified that going on a unilateral basis will be the first step towards increasing gender gap and going away from the rights of women. And not only that, if we compare the Nordic countries and such as Germany, New Zealand, the way the females have come to top leadership positions has a direct correlation between the rights of women that have been ensured in their systems, starting with their labor rights. If you look at the maternity leave, the simplest things, you see how women have been empowered in those countries and how that has directly contributed to lessening the gender gap and bringing females forward. And that was clearly reflected during the COVID situation, where these Nordic countries, New Zealand, Jacinta, we talk about her with great pride. All the female-headed countries did very well. And they have proved that if they are given the opportunity, they can do a lot more. And Sri Lanka being a country with the first prime minister, we have had a female president, and we have capable women in this country if they are given that opportunities to play the diverse roles that they play as a daughter, as a mother, as an entrepreneur. We have seen the CEOs coming up lately, but only if we can give them this backup with the system, with the legislature, and using examples from other nations. That is why multilateralism is important in Sri Lanka for us to address these gender issues. Now, moving away from that, taking a little bit of time to talk about something that was not discussed. I think dispute resolution was an issue that we did not discuss about in the new normal. In the new normal, people do not have the capacity to run to court all the times because the country was on a lockdown, but businesses had so many issues that they had to resolve. So everyone had to go online. But what was the mechanism that was available to resolve these disputes? Internationally, they all had online mediation, and mediation had become an appropriate dispute resolution. Since that is my specialized area, that's why I thought it's important to talk about this. Now, Sri Lanka, on a multilateral level, last year signed and became a signatory to the International Convention on Mediation in last year August in Singapore. But now, do we have a national mechanism to push our youth to become professional mediators, to learn about this appropriate dispute resolution skills? That, I think, is something that we have to think about. I'm sorry if I exceeded my time, but I think that will really help us to face the new norm.
Thank you. Sarani, I really salute you on your comments and intervention. I think thank you for your boldness and your fiery intervention, and I think you have very solid points to do that. And as we said, Sri Lanka has some very good story to say and to present about gender empowerment, but there is so much more that has to be done, and unless we create a supportive environment and an encouraging environment for women, it's very difficult for them alone to grab the moment. And all of us, lots of us who have been working and of course are in senior positions, we know that as well. So thank you very much for your intervention. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but I think you've put it very clear. Thank you. My next, so we have just maximum 10 more minutes. So next up is youth and peace activist Anujita.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll directly come to my point. I wanted to give a point that I really agree with Sarani, because I really wanted to raise this question, but she already did. Thank you, Sarani, for that. So I'll come to my point. Whenever I check the daily report of COVID-19 patients in Sri Lanka, I always pray the God and request him, God, please kindly make sure that the person who is affected by COVID-19 belongs to my community, or
belongs to my particular religion. Because otherwise these people will start to blame or to spread hate speech over my community and picturing us as the spread community who is bring this coronavirus to our country. This is not the statement from my side, but this is something delivered by a youth in Sri Lanka while we had a discussion recently. So these words really hit me back because we always talk about peace building. We always talk about global issues. We always think about sustainable future. But I wanted to ask, like, are we really into this? Are we doing something in action? Because what we always do is we always shift ourselves from one topic to the another. Yesterday we discussed about terrorism and Easter Sunday attacks, but today we are discussing about COVID-19, and tomorrow we will discuss about something else. But we always forget to give attention to the underlying issues that always create such problems in this country, in this world. Youth radicalization is one of such great issue over the history, not just in Sri Lanka, but across the world. Sri Lanka has the history of how youth are misled and misguided by particular groups, particular communities over the time. But we still didn't find our solutions, or we still didn't discuss about those issues, but we always change our topics. For an example, I will say, like, I don't say that youth are the resources, youth are the leaders for the tomorrow's future. Not everyone going to become a leader, but they are the resources for tomorrow's future. They can be masons, they can be farmers in future, but they are going to be the resources for tomorrow's future. So those resources has to be shaped and molded by us, by the current generation, in order to utilize in future. For an example, I will say my story. I'm a young girl who has been working in the peace building field, especially with youth and marginalized groups, for more than 3 years. But in 2009, May 17, I was in Mullawaikal. I was in the war zone. But which brought me to this far is not just my individual capacity. It's not just I challenged myself and I learned languages. It's all about people who supported me beyond their racial, religious, political beliefs. It's all about opportunities that has given to me. It's all about spaces that are open for me to welcome myself. So I don't agree with the thing that we have to challenge ourselves, then only we can go forward. We also have to give the opportunities and the spaces to work on that. Today also, even I got the opportunity from the UN to speak about these issues, but this is not the thing that is happening with every youth in Sri Lanka. There are a lot of people, as Tushan mentioned, there are a lot of people struggling with their modern poverty. There are a lot of people struggling to get a better education. There are a lot of people struggling to find out jobs. There are a lot of people who wants to actually improve their skills and knowledge, but they are lacking opportunity. So what we are going to do about it, how we can contribute it, it's not just international community. As a global citizens, we all have that responsibility and duty. We can do this only by creating spaces and opportunities for the youth over the world. It cannot be done just by blaming the youth or just by saying that we all have opportunities, you say. Because the opportunities, what I mean here is not just about volunteerism or like giving spaces to talk. It has to be beyond that. It can be a recognition, it can be a financial support, it can be anything, but it just not only volunteerism. So I would like to end up this intervention with two questions, not towards these panelists, but also towards all the people who is joining us today. This discussion is not just for today only. So this has to be brought at wider level. So how we are going to ensure that? And my second question is, how are we going to facilitate ourselves as a facilitator to create opportunities for youths in our own work? So these two questions I wanted to ask from everyone, and I think then only we can work together and we can find solutions always together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I also really salute you for raising a point that none of us raised it at the beginning, which is the side effect of the corona, not only the disease, but the stigma and discrimination that impacts those who get infected. And I think very good points you have raised it. You've raised a few questions, and I think the panel would like to come in at one point. But now let me, before moving to the responses, let me hear from, last but not least, definitely, a research economist at the Institute of Policy Studies, Kitmina Hewaga.
Thank you, Hannah. And I mean, a lot of my colleagues who have spoken before me have covered pretty much everything. But I would like to highlight the issues of COVID-19 and inequality, particularly from an economics perspective. I think one thing that we've understood and what we have taken measure of is that COVID-19 has highlighted the true cost of inequality in society. As we've seen, particularly during this most recent wave of COVID-19 cases in Sri Lanka, it's the blue-collar workers, it's the low-income and vulnerable groups and communities that are most affected. But it is not isolated only to that community. The impacts of that on those communities have had an impact on the wider economy as well. And it shows as to how much inequality exists. It shows the vulnerabilities of these communities, and it shows as to why we need to act fast. So I want to touch on three main things, because as the minister earlier rightly pointed out, we live in a very different world from a few decades ago. We live in a globalized world full of global supply chains and so on, which makes it clear that there are lots of opportunities available to people in Sri Lanka, the youth in particular, as well as around the world. But we need to assess as to why we are unable to leverage those opportunities. And that comes down to privilege. And this privilege comes in different forms. It might be political, it might be economic, gender, religion, and so on and so forth. And I think if you ask a lot of the youth who are part of this conversation as well, there is a general feeling that to succeed in Sri Lanka, you need political and economic connections. And that's an unfortunate reality to some. And we need to address those issues of privilege and how privilege plays a part in economic success and leveraging the sort of opportunities that multilateralism has brought to the world. So three things that I want to touch on quickly. One is education and the importance of education. We already had a discussion about the importance of language, both English as well as the sad truth in Sri Lanka is that there are fewer opportunities if you speak Tamil, for example, or only speak Tamil. And for example, even if you speak Sinhala, then global opportunities are also few and far between. So there are levels of privilege and levels of inequality when it comes to the use of language. The second thing is skills, and it was touched on. I think one thing that I would like to add to this is that I think we need to consider moving away from an exams-based education system. I am part of the national debating team in the country, and I've seen the level of talent that is available in the country, but because of exams, because of the institutional structures that are set up in the country, that talent is inhibited, particularly outside Colombo, particularly outside the Western province. So we need to take a note of that. Second is in terms of access, and this is both in terms of technological access as well as institutional access. So the speakers before me spoke a lot about technology access, and I think fewer than 50% of the households in Sri Lanka have access to a laptop and internet connection. And that has affected educational outcomes, particularly in this day and age when we have lockdowns and moving on to online platforms. But the second thing is institutional access. So for example, if someone wants, and I think Sri Lankans are not bereft of ideas, they're not bereft of innovations, and we see this all over the country. But the issue is scaling up those innovations, scaling up those ideas, and access to sort of institutions that would help people scale up their ideas into something that can be made into a profit, something that can be monetized. That is a problem. And if someone, for example, outside the Western province has a good idea, but wants to, get a patent, institutional access restrictions on institutional access is an issue, and therefore that idea then kind of goes aside, and then they can just get a 9-to-5 job. So these are issues that we need to address. Finally, I think in terms of what we need to do for the future, 3 areas in terms of facilitation. First is, I think we need to leverage the diaspora networks that we have in Sri Lanka. We have a lot of brain drain during the past 2 or 3 decades. A lot of skilled workers went to other countries around the world and have invested a lot and have gained a lot of skills. I think we need to get back those skills, get back those ideas, and be able to invest those ideas into creating a more inclusive economy in Sri Lanka. So leveraging those diaspora networks better. The second thing is, I think we need to reassess the role of social media. It is not just about politics. It's not just about a communication standard. It's also an opportunity for economic empowerment. And we see this in terms of how particularly female entrepreneurs are able to use social media for their entrepreneurship and develop business ideas that are much more accessible because of social media. So when policymakers make policies based on social media, I think it's important to also acknowledge the economic benefits that social media has, and then take measures accordingly. Finally, I think it's important that we assess the role of multilateral organizations overall, because I think there's a broader move towards protectionist populism around the world. And the last time the world experienced a crisis like this was at the conclusion of the Second World War. And we completely revamped our conception of multilateralism because we understood that our previous conception was flawed and we needed to improve it. And I think a similar reassessment is necessary right now in order to make sure that through the multilateral system that we are able to address these inequalities, both institutional, both economic, social, and so on. So the multilateral system has to, I think, reform and upgrade itself to the modern realities in order to serve the citizens of those countries better. And that comes both from the institutional level, so this might be the UN and other institutions, multilateral institutions. Secondly, it should come from the policymakers, so governments. And thirdly, it should come from the citizenship through civil society as well as from the individual level. And through all these matters, through all these factors, I think we need to understand that we live in a different world from what we were experiencing at the start of the millennium, and then adjust accordingly. Thank you.
Very much, and well noted. Your areas, very interesting, the need to leverage the diaspora network and to get back the brains that left us, and leveraging also the social media beyond the economic, the political, the politics, and your points on reassessment and the importance of reassessment and realigning the role of the multilateralism. Thank you very much, very good points. Colleagues, I think we nearly came to the end of our panel. However, the panel discussion. There are a few questions online, and I don't think we have yet the time. So what I propose is that the questions can be forwarded to the panelists and that you answer the colleagues online. However, before we conclude, I want to give each of you, 30 seconds to give the last thinking, the last point. So can we start by Doctor?
Well, yes, I think we've been discussing a lot of important points with regards to sustainable development goals in the fourth industrial revolution. While we move forward with technology, how we need to really take leadership in our lives, and at the same time how we can support one another, because we can't it was clearly mentioned, we can't live in isolation, but we need to live as a team, and we need to address all of these causes as one family, as one nation, as one world, and move forward. And I think definitely with these in mind, we would be able to move forward holding hands with one another and supporting one another in achieving these goals. And also I'd like to highlight that these sustainable development goals, I believe it would be better if we can inculcate these to the curriculum of the schools and also to the universities. Actually, in our university, we have already inculcated it to the curriculum, and we are working on a module to develop the students to do research and developments in the sustainable development goals. If that can be done, definitely we can look forward to more research, more inventions and innovations in the areas of achieving SDGs in 2020, and we can look forward to a brighter future for our nation and for the world as a whole.
Thank you very much. Shadika?
Yes, thank you. I would like to, I'm very glad that the point was made of the link between opportunity and privilege. I think it is something that we should address in a broader manner, and I think that is why in some cases opportunities have to be there in the system itself. It is not individual, it should be in the system itself. So which is why I want all of us to keep pushing for this change in systems. That is one point that I want to make. And the other is inequality. I think I should mention again is a root cause for most of these issues. Even for radicalization, inequality can be an issue. So universality of opportunities is extremely important. I would like to bring your attention to that. And also the importance of being from the Ministry of Education, I should mention that the importance of, as was mentioned, value education to build resilience, empathy, acceptance and listening in students. I would like to draw the attention to opportunities brought by the technology stream and the newly introduced vocational stream, where we inculcate vocational skills in students, where we give opportunities for students all around the country, even if the one training center, vocational training center is located in Colombo, we give opportunities for all the students to come there and learn it, give them facilities for accommodation and an allowance as well. So these are some of the systematic changes that we can make and look forward to, and I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and would like to continue the conversation with the youth in our country and around the world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Venislos.
As young people, we are wearing two hats, especially in this modern day and age. One is being an active citizen of the country, and also being the digital citizen, right? And being the digital citizen, how we can leverage the opportunities that are available to us to tell our stories, and also to bridge the gaps of inequalities. In addition to doing that, how can we become the voices of our communities in amplifying the inadequacies that are present in our communities, and also communicating these ideas not only to our government, not only to the policymakers, but also to the multilateral organizations in a way that we come together, we amplify the necessities and needs that are existing out there, and also become bridges between our communities and the world outside. And I would like to end with the quote by Dr. Martin Luther King, "If not us, who? And if not now, when?" Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you again. Thank you very much. I think we've been hearing really nuggets of gold from all of you. And I'm very encouraged, actually inspired, that we continue this dialogue through really different platforms, and hopefully we can arrange for that, to continue this dialogue and to continue hearing your issues, but also the suggestions that you have all put forward and all the speakers have put forward as well. So this concludes, colleagues and friends, our UN 75 dialogue. Thanks to our panelists, really, really sincere thanks to each and every one of you, to the discussants, and to everyone joining us to celebrate the 75 years of multilateralism. Now, the questions that have been put online, we will respond. I will share it with you. We will respond to it online. And just as a wrap up, to remind everybody again that 75 years ago, the UN was formed and founded to further peace and security, human rights and development. Today, we need these foundations even more than ever as we face complex challenges, and we need young people. As you rightly said, we need young people because they are the ones who have to bear this. So we need young people to Sri Lanka and globally to join us and actually impose on us and shape the solutions for the future. We are in that together. So the UN stands ready with you, all right, to build together with you for a better tomorrow. So thank you all, everyone, for joining us for this UN 75 anniversary. Thank you all, and the very best of luck to Sri Lanka with the youth, with the opinions, with the interventions that we heard today from this wonderful, fantastic generation. I believe that Sri Lanka is in very safe hands because of its youth. Thank you so much, all of you.